Hello, dear friend. Welcome to this cozy little story time, where the world moves a little slower and hearts feel a little lighter. This tale is for everyone, no matter your age, your day, or your worries. So take a deep breath, pour a warm drink, and settle in. Today, we'll walk into a peaceful valley where stillness holds a gentle kind of power. Nestled between softly rising mountains and meadows dressed in wildflowers, there was a small village named Windmere. The rooftops were made of faded red tiles, and the cobbled streets curved like rivers through rows of ivy-covered cottages. Time moved slowly in Windmere, the kind of slow that made you notice the way light flickered through leaves, or how the wind carried the scent of fresh bread from someone's open window. On the far end of the village, near a grove of whispering pine trees, lived an old man named Theo. His cottage had a crooked chimney, a gate made of twisted vines, and a garden that hummed with bees, butterflies, and lavender. Theo was known as the Watcher, not because he spied on people, but because he paid attention to everything. The clouds, the birds, the way moss crept along the stone wall each spring. He didn't speak often, but when he did, it was usually something quietly wise, like, wait for the wind to settle before lighting a lantern. Children liked to visit Theo in the afternoons, especially during golden hour, when his garden glowed and smelled like lemon balm. He would sit on his wooden bench, wrapped in a knitted shawl, and let the silence bloom around them. There was a peace in Theo's presence, as if the world didn't need fixing, just listening. One day, a young woman named Elle arrived in Windmere. She came with quick footsteps and a satchel full of letters, ideas, and plans. Her hair was tied up in a messy bun, her boots dusty from travel, and her heart a little too full of urgency. She'd come looking for a place to start a new project, something big and meaningful. But what she found in Windmere was slowness, neighbors who paused between sentences. Even the cats seemed to stretch time out when they moved. Elle wasn't sure how to feel about that. She met Theo by accident, on a morning when she'd taken a wrong turn down a lane full of daisies. He looked up from his tea and nodded. "You're carrying a storm," he said, gently. Elle blinked, unsure whether to laugh or ask questions. But instead, Theo simply moved over on the bench and gestured to the space beside him. "Let's sit for a moment." And so, beneath the lazy sway of pine branches and the distant hum of bees, something small and quiet began to unfold, a story of stillness, patience, and the quiet breath before the world begins again. Elle hadn't meant to stay long in Windmere. Just a night or two, she told herself. But somehow, 3 mornings had passed, and she still hadn't left. Each day began the same way, soft sunlight spilling across the hills, the scent of fresh bread from the village bakery, and birdsong that seemed to pause just for her. Theo's cottage had become her morning stop. She never said much, just sat beside him on the garden bench. At first, the silence felt awkward. She kept wanting to fill it with questions or ideas or plans, but Theo never rushed her. He simply sat, sipping his tea, letting the garden hum around them. One morning, Elle finally asked, "Don't you ever feel like you should be doing something?" Theo smiled without opening his eyes. "I am doing something," he said. "I'm being." Elle laughed. "That's not what I meant." "I know," he replied gently. "But that's the part most people forget." They watched a butterfly land on a sprig of rosemary. Its wings quivered, catching the light like stained glass. Around them, the garden moved with the slow rhythm of nature, nothing forced, nothing hurried. That afternoon, Theo handed Elle a journal. The cover was worn leather, soft from years of use. "It's empty," he said. "Maybe write down the things you notice, not the things you plan." She opened the first page and wrote, "Butterfly, rosemary, wind in the trees." In the days that followed, Elle began noticing more. How the sky turned golden just before dusk. The way children's laughter echoed differently between stone walls. How even the chickens in Windmere had a lazy kind of cluck. Theo said little, but he had a way of asking small, thoughtful questions that stayed with her long after their walks ended. What happens when you pause before speaking? Have you ever watched the moon rise without checking the time? Is your rest earned, or is it your birthright? One evening, as they shared warm soup on the cottage porch, Elle whispered, I think I've forgotten how to just exist. Theo nodded. It's not your fault. The world keeps shouting, but we don't have to shout back. A gentle breeze stirred the ivy on the walls. Lanterns glowed in the windows of nearby cottages. From somewhere far off, a flute played slow and dreamy, like the valley itself. Elle looked down at her journal, then up at the stars just beginning to appear. I don't know what I'm going to do next, she said. That's all right, Theo replied. Stillness isn't the end. It's the beginning. And in that moment, wrapped in wool blankets and quiet wisdom, Elle didn't feel behind or lost. She felt ready to wait. By the 7th day, Windmere no longer felt like a stop on Elle's map. It felt like a breath she'd been holding her whole life, finally exhaled. She woke to soft light, slanting through the curtains of the small guest room she'd been offered above the baker's cottage. The scent of sweet cardamom rolls drifted up from the oven below. Bells in the village square chimed the hour, though Elle didn't check which one. Time was becoming less important. Her mornings with Theo had become sacred. No schedules, no distractions, just a bench, a garden, and quiet company. One morning, Theo led her through a trail behind his cottage, one she hadn't noticed before. They walked slowly through the woods, the soft crunch of leaves underfoot the only sound. Ferns brushed their knees. Moss-covered stones lined the path like ancient guardians. Eventually, the trees opened into a glade. At its center was a still pond, round and glassy, tucked like a secret between the hills. Why bring me here? Elle asked, sitting on a sun-warmed rock. Theo knelt beside the pond, dipping his fingers into the water. Because this is what you are now, he said. Not empty, reflective, clear. Elle didn't speak, but her eyes shimmered. They sat in silence until birds began to sing again. A dragonfly skimmed the water, and Theo handed her a smooth stone from the bank. Not every change comes with thunder, he said. Some arrive like this, quiet, deep. Back in the village, Elle started moving differently. She helped the baker knead dough before sunrise, read books by the fire at the library, and helped Mrs. Alderbrush gather herbs from her garden. She no longer looked at her phone each hour, or filled every pause with planning. And something beautiful began to happen. The people of Windmere started coming to her not with questions, but with presents. A small boy offered her a paper boat. A farmer gave her a basket of apples, just because. The village cat, who rarely liked newcomers, curled in her lap at the market square one afternoon and refused to leave. One evening, Theo handed her a folded map, but it wasn't marked with roads or towns, just circles, gentle brushstrokes of watercolor and soft pencil. What is this? She asked. The places where stillness leads to action, he replied. She traced one circle with her finger. And I'm ready to act? Theo smiled. You're ready to feel your next step, not force it. And as the stars blinked awake above the hills, Elle realized something deep and quiet inside her had shifted. She no longer needed the world to be fast to feel fulfilled. She just needed to listen. A full moon rose over Windmere the night before Elle planned to leave. The village rooftops shimmered silver under its light. In Theo's garden, lanterns swayed gently from the trees, casting golden pools over the grass. The scent of chamomile and wood smoke filled the cool evening air. Theo poured 2 cups of peppermint tea and handed one to Elle. She sat beside him, legs tucked under a woolen blanket, the same soft one he'd draped over the bench many evenings before. I never thought stillness could teach me anything, Elle said, tracing the rim of her cup. Theo chuckled softly. Stillness doesn't teach in words. It teaches in space, in noticing, in breathing. She looked around the ivy-covered walls, the low hum of crickets, the glimmer of dew already forming on the leaves. I think I've changed. You've remembered, he said, who you are without noise. In the morning, Elle packed her small satchel. This time, it wasn't filled with papers or notebooks or deadlines, just a sketchbook, the leather journal Theo had given her, the smooth stone from the pond, and a carefully wrapped jar of Windmere honey. As she stepped onto the path that led out of the village, a few familiar faces gathered to wave her off. The baker with flour still on her apron, Mr. Palth, Alderbrush with a bouquet of herbs, the children holding paper boats. Even the village cat sauntered over for one last nuzzle. Theo approached last, walking slowly, as he always did. "This isn't the end," he said, placing something in her hand, a tiny bell on a string. "Ring it when the world feels too loud. And remember, action born from stillness has deeper roots." Elle nodded, blinking back warmth in her eyes. "Thank you for giving me nothing and everything." Theo smiled. "Go gently." The path curved around a hill, leading Elle out of view but not away from the peace she had found. She carried it now, not in her bag, but in the rhythm of her breath, in the space between thoughts, in the silence she no longer feared. Back in the city, Elle didn't rush. She took her time settling in, choosing fewer things for her space, walking more slowly through the streets, and watching how light moved across her walls in the late afternoon. And, when she finally did begin her new project, a small studio space offering creative workshops, tea, and moments of pause for anyone needing rest, she built it in the spirit of Windmere. She called it the Still Room. People came not just to learn, but to breathe. And Elle, now the watcher in her own way, guided them not with big speeches, but with gentle questions, slow tea, and long, peaceful silences. Soft narrator closing voice. "Thank you, sweet friend, for joining us on this slow and beautiful journey. If this story brought you calm or comfort, I hope you'll carry that stillness with you too. Like, subscribe, and return anytime you need a breath between moments. Until next time, be still, be kind, and move gently." Hara.